All our stories are created for entertainment purposes only.
I'm a 39-year-old guy, and I'm engaged to Shelly, my coworker. She came in as the new recruiter on a different team, but since we share the same floor, we clicked. After hanging out a bit, I threw caution to the wind and asked her out. We cruised through 3 years of dating before deciding to put a label on it. We're planning our wedding for next year. Like any normal couple, we've had our fair share of ups and downs, arguments, and plenty of love. Everything was going well, and our love was strong. But things changed when I got promoted to a different department in a different location. Ever since then, things have been falling apart. My work and commute have kept me really busy, and we don't get to spend as much time together as we used to. Before, since we worked in the same office, it felt like we were always together. We commuted together, went out for dinner after work, and even had lunch and coffee breaks together. Our offices were in the same city, so it wasn't a long-distance relationship, but now that we're not in the same office anymore, things have shifted. However, that adjustment wasn't the biggest problem. The real issue was Smith, Shelly's senior teammate. I've never really liked the guy. I don't like how close they are or the way he behaves around her, and this has become a major cause of our frequent arguments since my location changed. It's not just baseless jealousy. I had worked with Smith before, and he doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to women. He always had his eyes on every girl who worked with him and would often flirt with them. I've mentioned this to Shelly before. I told her that if she's working with him, she should maintain some healthy distance and not let him cross any boundaries. However, she never really took my advice seriously. She'd often say that I was accusing Smith of things I didn't know for sure. According to her, Smith was just a friendly and sweet guy, and people often misunderstood him. Sometimes I couldn't help but wonder if she was either too kind to dislike anyone or simply too naive to see through people. After I moved to the other location, I noticed that Shelly started having lunch and coffee breaks with Smith. Even though she had the option to hang out with her colleagues, she still chose to spend time with her senior. It became even more frustrating for me when I saw her packing an extra lunchbox for Smith almost every other day. Her closeness to Smith started becoming evident on social media, with his flirty comments on her pictures, and the two of them tagging each other in memes constantly. To make matters worse, at the last office party, she decided to go with Smith instead of accepting my offer to pick her up from the office and go to the party together. She insisted that I should go directly to the party from my workplace. At the party, I had hoped to enjoy some quality time with my former colleagues, but I couldn't shake the feeling that people were hinting at something when it came to Smith and Shelly's closeness. I decided to talk to Shelly about it, expressing my concerns that their behavior was making others uncomfortable. I wasn't comfortable with them hugging each other so frequently, or with Smith placing his hands on her back all the time. Shelly's response surprised me. She claimed that Smith was like a best friend to her and reassured me that she would never betray our relationship. I couldn't help but think, when did Smith become her best friend out of nowhere? To add to my concerns, I heard from a few people that Shelly was acting like Smith's assistant at the office, getting him coffee, preparing homemade lunches, and essentially following his every command. She argued that people were just jealous because Smith was supposedly grooming her for a future promotion. I tried to make her understand that seeking help from seniors was one thing, but becoming their puppet was a completely different story. She got upset when she heard this and accused me of insulting her and attempting to control her. I was honestly surprised by her reaction. Most of our arguments started revolving around Smith. Things took a turn for the worse when I caught them sitting too close for comfort and then lying about it. One day, I had to make a surprise visit to my former office for an urgent meeting, and I didn't inform Shelly about it. I wanted to catch her off guard. After the meeting, I went to Shelly's cubicle, but she wasn't there. Someone told me she was in the cafeteria upstairs, so I headed there to find her. To my shock, I saw Shelly sitting very intimately with Smith. His hands were on her back and sometimes on her thighs. What bothered me even more was that she never once asked him to stop touching her. They appeared to be having a rather friendly conversation, but it didn't seem work-related at all. I stood near the elevator and watched them for a while. I decided to call her, and she glanced at her phone screen but then placed it face down on the table. Seeing that infuriated me. I sent her a text asking if she was busy. She read the message and took a minute before replying that she was in a meeting. That one lie made me realize how many other lies she had been feeding me all along. I messaged her again, letting her know that I was actually in the office. She showed my message to Smith, and they both got up, presumably to leave. I left before they could reach the elevator. I went straight home, even though there were still a few hours left in my workday. I just couldn't focus on work with the state of mind I was in. It hurt deeply because I truly loved her and didn't expect her to lie to me. After a while, she texted me asking where I was and if I had left the office. I chose to ignore her messages. When she got home, she asked me why I left the office without letting her know. I told her I had a terrible headache, so I came back home. That week felt like a long one as we barely exchanged words and I kept my distance. However, things changed when we received an email about some teams going on an office trip for a client meeting. I noticed Shelley and Smith's names on the list from their department, but my team wasn't included in the program. Rumor had it that Smith was the one who chose Shelley to go with him. Shelley came back home that day, strangely happy. After dinner, she began packing for the trip, which was still a week away. I won't deny that her excitement annoyed me a bit. She tried on a few formal outfits before packing and asked me how she looked. I couldn't help but make a sarcastic comment about how attractive she looked and how Smith wouldn't be able to resist her in those outfits. She sat there on the couch, staring at me with a cold gaze. After the icy silence, she started yelling at me. She said that she wasn't responsible for my insecurities and that I couldn't control her. Shelley accused me of not trusting her and claimed that I was trying to restrict her freedom, accusing me of promoting patriarchal behavior. She made it clear that she wouldn't let her career opportunity slip because of me. I stayed silent for a moment and then told her that I had seen her having a meeting with Smith in the cafeteria. Her face turned pale and she responded with, "Well, all the meeting rooms were occupied, so we had to meet in the cafeteria." I retorted, "Yes, and you both seemed so engrossed in your conversation. He even rubbed your back while you ignored my calls and showed my texts to Smith." Her anger shifted to embarrassment, as she admitted that she had been afraid I'd get angry if she told me she was having a coffee break with Smith. She stayed quiet and explained that she was trying to avoid Smith, but it was challenging to completely ignore someone in the same department, especially when he was her senior and helping her improve in her job. She almost let slip how indebted she felt to him for his assistance. Surprised, I asked what kind of help he was providing that made her feel so obligated to him, even if it meant risking our relationship and hurting me. She requested that I trust her and assured me she would never do anything to damage our relationship. Honestly, I wasn't accusing her of cheating, but their behavior towards each other crossed boundaries that could be considered cheating, and if left unchecked, it might escalate quickly. Our argument dragged on for hours, and she turned it into a dramatic crying and weeping ordeal. It became so stressful that I decided to address it calmly at a later time. The business trip was genuinely significant, and I didn't want to jeopardize her chances by making a fuss about it. I told her I trusted her, and now it was her responsibility to reciprocate that trust and avoid any actions that could jeopardize it. Eventually, we patched things up after the argument. She was enthusiastic about the trip and her presentations. However, I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling as she left, even though I dropped her off happily and wished her luck. She called me earlier to let me know she arrived safely and was preparing for her big day tomorrow. While I trusted her, I couldn't ignore the discomfort I felt about her closeness to Smith. If I were to discuss this with anyone, I'd likely be labeled as an insecure man. I appreciate having this space where I can openly express my feelings without worrying about judgment. Of course, she believed he was a jovial and sweet guy because he was skilled at sweet-talking her. Plus, it's natural for changes to occur when you don't see your partner as often day to day. But this guy clearly had ulterior motives. No doubt about it. And calling him her best friend? It's more like best friends with benefits. What she's doing seems more like emotional cheating than physical cheating. If you have a bad feeling about this guy, especially considering his reputation, chances are your intuition is spot on. Update. It's been a while since my last update. I was worried that I might be criticized for being too controlling with my fiancé, but I'm grateful that you've affirmed that I was simply being cautious and not letting any red flags go unnoticed. I'm relieved that I didn't overlook those warning signs. After my previous post, I read numerous stories on this community about spouses cheating on business trips, which left me feeling anxious. I tried to be understanding, but I couldn't help but imagine various scenarios in my head of Shelley cheating on me with Smith. I had this strong urge to call and check on her frequently, but I managed to rein in my thoughts and give her some space. Her behavior during and after the 3-day trip was strange. She was unusually quiet and acted differently. When I asked if everything was all right, she mentioned that her presentation didn't go as planned, which she said was the reason for her mood. However, it felt like there was something else going on, and her actions raised suspicions for me. She had never been that clingy before, but now she was texting me constantly and wanted to be around me all the time. It wasn't that I disliked her cleanliness, but it all seemed to happen so suddenly that I found it hard to comprehend her true intentions. I couldn't figure out what was happening between her and Smith. She never mentioned his name once, and I never saw her texting him either. I wasn't sure if her behavior was a result of guilt or if these were her genuine feelings. Initially, I thought maybe she was distancing herself from him because she knew it upset me, but it turned out to be more complicated than that. I appreciate having this space where I can openly express my feelings without worrying about judgment. Of course, she believed he was a jovial and sweet guy because he was skilled at sweet-talking her. Plus, it's natural for changes to occur when you don't see your partner as often day to day, but this guy clearly had ulterior motives, no doubt about it. And calling him her best friend? It's more like best friends with benefits. What she's doing seems more like emotional cheating than physical cheating. If you have a bad feeling about this guy, especially considering his reputation, chances are your intuition is spot on. Update. It's been a while since my last update. I was worried that I might be criticized for being too controlling with my fiancé, but I'm grateful that you've affirmed that I was simply being cautious and not letting any red flags go unnoticed. I'm relieved that I didn't overlook those warning signs. After my previous post, I read numerous stories on this community about spouses cheating on business trips, which left me feeling anxious. I tried to be understanding, but I couldn't help but imagine various scenarios in my head of Shelley cheating on me with Smith. I had this strong urge to call and check on her frequently, but I managed to rein in my thoughts and give her some space. Her behavior during and after the 3-day trip was strange. She was unusually quiet and acted differently. When I asked if everything was all right, she mentioned that her presentation didn't go as planned, which she said was the reason for her mood. However, it felt like there was something else going on, and her actions raised suspicions for me. She had never been that clingy before, but now she was texting me constantly and wanted to be around me all the time. It wasn't that I disliked her cleanliness, but it all seemed to happen so suddenly that I found it hard to comprehend her true intentions. I couldn't figure out what was happening between her and Smith. She never mentioned his name once, and I never saw her texting him either. I wasn't sure if her behavior was a result of guilt or if these were her genuine feelings. Initially, I thought maybe she was distancing herself from him because she knew it upset me, but it turned out to be more complicated than that. A few weeks later, I found myself back at my old office for a meeting. When the meeting concluded, I headed down to catch up with Shelley and my former colleagues. To my surprise, Shelley's desk was empty, and I inquired about her whereabouts. I learned that she had called in sick that day, which was news to me. Typically, I left the office earlier than Shelley since my workplace was farther away. I thought perhaps she had fallen ill after I had left our office. I tried calling her to check on her health, but she didn't pick up. Eventually, she returned my call, claiming she was tied up in a work meeting. Curious, I asked about the nature of the meeting, and she responded rather irritably, "It's a work meeting." I then asked if she was still at the office, and she curtly replied, "Yes, where else would I be on a Wednesday afternoon?" Before hanging up. This left me with a whirlwind of thoughts about her lying. I also noticed that we hadn't been intimate since her return from the business trip. Whenever I initiated, she either claimed to be too tired or not in the mood. When I got home, I had the intention of having a serious conversation with her, but I found her asleep, looking rather pale. I decided to postpone our discussion until dinner. Later, when she woke up, I tried to inquire about her day, hoping she would be honest. However, she simply replied that it had been good. Just as I was about to confront her, she suddenly mentioned wanting to transfer to my office location. I asked her why she wanted to make the move and if something was bothering her. She insisted that everything was fine, giving no further explanation. I pointed out that her behavior had changed since returning from the business trip, and she attributed it to her disappointment over her performance in front of a client, fearing it might affect her chances of getting a promotion. I reassured her that it was okay, and sometimes things just don't go as planned, so she shouldn't stress too much about it. However, she still didn't mention why she called in sick at work on that particular day. Seeing that she was stressed, I decided to postpone discussing it further until later. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep, but I couldn't shake off my unease about her recent behavior. Feeling suspicious, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone. I went straight to her WhatsApp messages, remembering that I had checked her phone once before her office trip. While she never seemed particularly interested in Smith, he had shown some affection toward her. The last text exchange between them occurred before her business trip, and there had been no communication since. I also glanced at her social media direct messages but found nothing suspicious there. As I continued scrolling through her inbox, I stumbled upon a text message that grabbed my attention. It was from an app where she had scheduled an appointment with a gynecologist shortly after her return from the trip. The text indicated that the doctor had sent her a report through the app. Intrigued, I opened the app and discovered an in-app chat conversation between Shelley and her doctor, detailing a consultation. In their conversation, Shelley revealed that she had experienced post-coital bleeding. I had no idea what that meant. The doctor suggested she take an STI test. These texts set off alarm bells in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I proceeded to the report section of the app and retrieved her test results. To my relief, the results were negative. However, I couldn't help but wonder why she needed to take such a test when we hadn't been intimate for nearly a month. I grew increasingly anxious and apprehensive. A quick Google search defined post-coital bleeding as bleeding resulting from rough or forceful intercourse. My heart sank because I knew I had never been rough or forceful with her. This left me with a terrible dilemma. Either she had cheated on me, or someone had forced themselves on her. Both scenarios were devastating, and I couldn't find solace throughout the night. Instead, I spent the night pacing in the backyard, desperately trying to calm my racing thoughts. When she woke up the next morning, I was sitting in the living room sporting sleep-deprived eyes. She inquired about my whereabouts during the night, and I replied that I had spent it reading her STI reports. Her reaction was immediate. She froze and took a seat on the couch, struggling to find the right words. I explained that I had visited the office yesterday and discovered that she had been on leave, which conflicted with her previous explanation. She admitted that she had lied impulsively, claiming she was at an adoption clinic when I had called. She tried to rationalize her lie, citing anxiety as the reason. However, I cut her off, expressing my conviction that she had cheated on me. She attempted to manipulate me further, insisting that STIs could cause post-coital bleeding and that her negative test results proved her innocence. I confronted her, asking from whom she had contracted the STI, and she began to cry. She continued to deny any wrongdoing, asserting that she had merely taken the test to ensure her health, given the stress she was under. She explained that she had avoided closeness until the reports came in. I countered that STIs don't materialize without contact, and we hadn't been intimate for months. Before I could voice my disbelief, she repeated her desire to confirm her health status. My trust in her had eroded completely, and I told her I needed a break from the relationship. The ensuing argument grew increasingly intense, with her adamantly refusing to admit any wrongdoing. She offered one feeble excuse after another, and I felt my patience waning. In an effort to avoid doing something regrettable in my state of mind, I decided to leave. She broke down, pleading with me not to go, but I left the situation behind. I'm currently staying with my parents, trying to process this unimaginable situation. It's a challenging time, and her tears seem like nothing more than a facade. It's like catching a little baby with their hand in the cookie jar. You already have a strong suspicion she's been cheating. I mean, she goes on a trip, and when she returns, she needs to undergo all these tests. It's pretty clear she cheated on you. This woman is just impossible to deal with. Update. It turns out she's not only a cheater, but also a fraud. After storming out of my house, I stayed at my parents' place. She's been continuously trying to reach out to me during this time. Then, after a week, I received an urgent call from the company's director, asking me to come to his office right away because there was a very serious matter that needed immediate attention. I rushed to his cabin and learned that someone had leaked the design for her upcoming project to a rival company, resulting in her proposal being rejected. This project was a big deal for our construction company, and the pressure was on to find a solution quickly. It was a tense and high-pressure situation, and I was working hard to resolve it. While I was dealing with this at the office, a visitor arrived. It was Smith's wife. I had met her a few times at office parties. She had something important to tell me, and I had a feeling I knew what it was. She revealed that during the business trip, Smith had mistakenly sent her a photo where he was drunk and making out with Shelley. She was aware that Shelley and I were engaged, and she wanted me to know the truth. Even though I had a strong suspicion, hearing that all my worst thoughts were true was heart-wrenching. I sat there, feeling numb and unable to process what had just happened. She showed me the picture, and it was difficult to look at. They were both undressed, and Shelley seemed drunk. I was so furious that I wanted to kick Shelley out of my life immediately. The affair partner's wife was crying uncontrollably and appeared extremely distressed and exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in weeks. I asked her if she was okay. She told me she was all right, but there was something important she needed to share. She seemed quite agitated and unsure about whether to reveal it or not, considering it was a significant matter. I reassured her that I wouldn't let her face any trouble for this, at least not from my side. She went on to disclose that Smith had sold the project design we were planning to create to a competitor company for a substantial sum of money. Naturally, I asked her how she came to know about all this. She explained that she had secretly accessed Smith's laptop after he returned from the business trip and sifted through all his emails. She provided me with all the evidence and encouraged me to take appropriate action against Smith. What shocked me even more was that Shelley was deeply involved in this scheme. Both of them had conspired against the company, and this had been their hidden agenda during all those seemingly crucial meetings. It was infuriating to think that we had put in so much hard work for this project, while they had been fooling around for their own selfish gain. I immediately went to the company director and presented him with all the evidence. The investigation was still ongoing, and the team had uncovered some clues pointing towards Smith, but they hadn't found concrete evidence yet. However, the details provided by the affair partner's wife left no doubt about the culprits. When I returned home that day, Shelley looked utterly miserable, like a shadow of her former self. To be honest, I no longer cared about her at all. I had given her as many chances as she needed, but she had shown complete disregard for our relationship and had ruined everything. She gazed at me with a sense of indifference, and I told her to stay away from me. She tried to downplay the situation, but I pulled up the incriminating picture that the affair partner's wife had shared with me and thrust it in front of Shelley's face. She froze. Perhaps she wanted to claim it was doctored or something, but my expression left no room for doubt, and she backed down. I informed her that we had all the evidence against her and Smith for selling the project design to the competitor. She feigned ignorance, but I reminded her that the evidence clearly implicated her involvement in the scheme. She claimed that her affair partner had access to her laptop and might have misused it. At this point, I wasn't sure if she was still lying or if her affair partner had indeed manipulated her. Frankly, I don't care anymore. After discovering her true colors, I feel like I never really knew her, and she had been living a double life all along. I made it clear to her that this revelation doesn't absolve her of being a terrible person. She began crying and begging me for another chance, but just the sight of her made me feel disgusted. I ended the engagement by tossing the ring at her and demanded that she leave the house. Getting her out of my life wasn't easy, as she bombarded me with endless texts and voicemails, even though I had blocked her. It's been a few days since she left. I'd been staying at my parents' place until she vacated the house. Her affair partner got fired and blacklisted for his fraudulent actions. The management is also working on filing an official complaint against him to ensure he doesn't harm another company. Shelley, too, lost her job. She tried to show up at my parents' place, asking me not to ruin her career, but I made it clear that the decision wasn't mine, and there was nothing I could do about it. It's undeniably a challenging phase for me, but I can't help but feel relieved that I escaped a relationship with someone who turned out to be an imposter. It's perplexing that she would ask me not to harm her career when she was the one who made all the choices, including working with that scoundrel Smith. Actually, she wasn't just working. She was working all angles.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
Story 2. I don't even know where to begin. It was about 25 years ago when I, a 50-year-old woman, had an affair with my now husband, who was 55 at the time. Back then, he was married to Mary, who was just 28 years old. Unfortunately, I got pregnant as a result of that affair, and I had to come clean with my husband. This led to their divorce, which was incredibly painful for all parties involved. It was a tough situation. After the divorce, my husband and I decided to get married when our daughter Anna was just 2 years old. We recognized that we were both responsible for the mess we had created. We even sought couples counseling to work through our issues. We fully acknowledged that what we did was wrong, and we've endured a lot of emotional and mental suffering as a result. However, we worked hard to make our marriage work over the years. Fast forward to when our daughter Anna got married at the age of 23. Just 10 months into her marriage, she discovered her husband cheating on her. It was a devastating blow for her, and she was utterly shattered. She couldn't eat or sleep properly, and I even found out she had considered ending her own life at one point. Fortunately, she was able to obtain a divorce and moved in with us. We provided her with all the support she needed, including therapy, a place to live, and assistance in finding a job. She's doing much better now, but the scars from her husband's affair still haunt her, especially considering they had been together since she was just 16. During this difficult period for my daughter, my mind couldn't help but wander back to my own past. I realized that I had once been the one involved in an affair that tore apart a marriage. I had an affair with a married man, and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Mary, my husband's first wife, had experienced the same pain that my daughter was going through now. If not more, considering my husband had been married to her for a significant amount of time. This guilt began to resurface, and it was eating away at me. I tried everything to cope with this guilt. I sought therapy for myself and tried to convince myself that it was all in the past, that it had happened 25 years ago. However, my husband eventually noticed that something was seriously bothering me, and he asked what was wrong. I decided to confide in him, revealing the truth about my past and how I had played a role in his first marriage falling apart. I explained that I couldn't carry this guilt inside me forever. My husband and I had a long conversation about it. Unfortunately, Anna had been eavesdropping on our conversation, and a few days later, she approached me with a heartbreaking question. She wanted to know if she was the child of an affair, as she had overheard our discussion about her father's affair and how she was the result of our past actions. I had no choice but to come clean with her. Anna reacted with anger and used hurtful words. She called me a homewrecker, expressed her hatred for being the product of deception and infidelity, and even confronted her dad, labeling him as a disgusting cheater. In the end, she left our home and cut off all contact, seeking refuge at her aunt's house, who happens to be my husband's sister. Sil and Mary were pretty close, and that's why she never really liked me. She just tolerated my presence because of our daughter. We visited Sael's house, but our daughter was still giving us the silent treatment. Sil spilled the beans to my daughter about everything. My husband got into an argument with her. Sil explained that she had promised not to intentionally spill the beans to Anna, but if she ever asked, she wouldn't lie to her. So when my daughter asked for more details, she kept her promise and spilled the truth. Now my daughter doesn't want to talk to us. It turns out that Anna managed to track down Mary, and she found out that Mary is living in the same town as us. Mary has since remarried and has her own kids. Honestly, I can't understand why my daughter wants to meet that woman. I tried to dissuade her, telling her it's a terrible idea, but all she said was, "A homewrecker like you wouldn't understand what I'm going through." I'm still feeling distressed, and my husband is upset too. I'm fully aware of the guilt from my past actions, but I wouldn't wish this situation on anyone. I desperately want to mend things between me and my daughter. Please, I need some guidance as a mother. Edit. I'm aware that I'm getting a lot of criticism. I can't change the past or fix everything I've done. I just don't want my daughter to feel like she's the product of a lie. She's a product of our love, despite our messy beginning. I know I messed up, and I'm willing to accept the consequences, but I don't want my daughter to suffer for it. After the divorce, Mary cut off contact with everyone, including my husband and even Sil. Honestly, during that time I was preoccupied with my pregnancy and didn't really give much thought to my husband's past. I didn't seek closure or anything like that. I briefly considered writing her a letter, but it felt like I'd be rubbing salt in the wound, and I never intended to tell my daughter about our past because, well, it's in the past, and I didn't think it should affect her. The conversation about our past happened late at night, and I thought Anna was already asleep. She came to our room to ask for some headache meds and overheard our conversation. Yes, I'm currently in therapy. My husband divorced Mary right after I told him I was pregnant. He was a good husband and father to Anna during their marriage. His past with Mary doesn't really have much relevance to our daughter's life. He never taught our daughter to cheat, and he actually gave her a pep talk before her wedding, emphasizing the importance of loyalty in a marriage. I know he failed in his first marriage, but he has genuinely changed a lot since then. To clarify, they did not have any kids together, and I didn't know he was married when we started seeing each other. When I found out, I did want to end the relationship, but he insisted he loved me and wasn't attracted to Mary anymore. Shortly after, I became pregnant. I know I was wrong for not ending it right away. But we were in love, and he assured me multiple times that he would get a divorce. Update. I want to express my gratitude to those who offered valuable advice instead of just criticizing me. I'm returning here because my life seems to be falling apart, and I feel powerless to stop it. Firstly, I followed your advice. We decided to give Anna some space and stopped bothering her until she felt ready to talk to us again. We didn't reach out to her until yesterday when she reached out to us. She had stopped talking to us about a week before I made my initial post. During that time, she went to visit Mary. After a week had passed, Anna messaged us yesterday and expressed her desire to talk. She suggested that we come to CIL's house. It was an emotional moment because, for the first time in a week, Anna hugged us. Tears filled my eyes as I told her how sorry we were for everything we had done. She also apologized for using harsh words against us, explaining that she was in a bad place and didn't know how to cope until she met Mary. My heart sank at this revelation. I had hoped that Mary would have spoken ill of us, but according to my daughter, Mary had been incredibly kind. When Mary learned about us and Anna's marriage, she hugged her and reassured her that it wasn't her fault. Mary considered her a wonderful woman who deserved better. She advised Anna not to waste her life on a guy who had broken her heart and had flaws in his character. They also talked about Mary's life journey. After her divorce, she severed ties with everyone connected to my husband and moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. She battled severe depression in the aftermath of her divorce. 2 years later, she met her current husband, and they fell in love. They got married and relocated to our town. According to my daughter, Mary's husband treats her like royalty, and they have 2 girls and a boy together. I felt genuinely happy to hear that Mary was doing well. She even gave my daughter a jar of her homemade special cookies. My daughter expressed that we should be thankful to Mary for not cutting off contact with us. Mary assured her that she held no grudge against us and had forgiven us a long time ago. She encouraged my daughter not to sever ties with us because, despite our mistakes, we had done a good job raising her. After all, we are humans, not angels. Anna shouldn't blame us or feel guilty about the affair. In a way, it led Mary to a much happier life. Anna isn't a result of deceit or betrayal. She's a blessing to the world, and she should be grateful to have supportive parents. I was deeply moved, and I won't deny it. I've always felt a tinge of jealousy towards Mary because she appears to be genuinely kind. I could never measure up to her because I've done something terrible. The guilt in my heart lingers, knowing that I hurt such a kind woman. Then my daughter dropped a bombshell. She explained that she still needs some time away from us. Even though Mary's perspective has lessened her anger towards us, when she looks at us, all she sees are people who have caused immense pain to others. She needs time to come to terms with it. We were heartbroken, to say the least, but we understood her request. She wants space and talked to us to test if forgiveness was possible. At the moment, she feels like she can't forgive us yet. She needs time to sort through her feelings and wants to continue talking to Mary because she provided valuable advice on dealing with infidelity. I assured her that we'll give her what she needs and that we love her unconditionally. I'm facing a dilemma. and I don't know what to do. All I want is to have my daughter back. These past few days have been incredibly stressful. It's not that I'm upset that she wants to talk to Mary. I'm just heartbroken that she doesn't want to share anything with me. She used to confide in me, even about the smallest things, and now I've become a stranger to her. Edit. I'm aware that someone claiming to be Mary made a similar post. I don't know if it's truly her or someone else with a different story. If you are reading this, Mary, I am genuinely and deeply sorry. I realize I'm 25 years too late, but now I understand the pain my husband and I caused you. It wasn't until my own daughter experienced a similar situation that I realized you must have endured a similar pain. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive. Thank you for taking care of my daughter. You are a good person with a kind heart. Here is a story from Mary's perspective. It's been quite a few years since I last had any contact with my husband or anyone connected to him. Back in our college days, my husband, 55M, and I, 53F, met, fell in love, and eventually got married. We built our life together, and the time came when we decided we were ready to start a family. I was 26, and he was 28 at the time. We tried for about 1.5 years without any success before seeking medical help. It turned out he had fertility issues, while I, on the other hand, was perfectly capable of conceiving. His deep desire for a child led to severe depression, and I was determined to do whatever it took to support him. I never pressured him and reassured him that I loved him dearly regardless of the circumstances. Then, one day, he dropped a bombshell on me. He confessed that he had gotten another woman pregnant. He had been cheating on me throughout our struggles with infertility. I actually knew this woman because she worked at a bakery my husband frequented. Now everything made sense. My heart shattered into a million pieces. We argued, and he expressed his desire to be with her because it seemed logical to him to stay with the mother of his child. I was furious with both of them. While I was desperately hoping for a child, my husband had impregnated another woman. It was painful to witness them together. This woman, let's call her B, even showed up at our divorce hearings and waited outside. Seeing my husband shower her with love and care, rubbing her pregnant belly, was agonizing. After our divorce, I left town and moved in with my parents. I was overwhelmed by deep depression, and I couldn't focus on anything. My father owned a small restaurant in my hometown, and it was there that I reconnected with my now husband, Bill, 53M. Bill and I had attended high school together. We struck up conversations, went on dates, and eventually I became pregnant with our son. That's when we decided to get married. Along the way, we welcomed twin daughters into our family. Bill received a fantastic job offer in the same town where I had previously lived with my ex-husband, and we decided to move there. Surprisingly, living in the same town didn't haunt me as I had feared. About 15 years ago, I happened to bump into my ex during a family picnic. He apologized, and I found it in my heart to forgive him, because holding on to grudges serves no purpose. We went our separate ways, and we haven't had any contact since. A few days ago, I received a surprising message from a young woman who asked if I knew my ex-husband. I was taken aback. She turned out to be the daughter of my ex-husband and B, let's call her A. A revealed that she was aware of her dad's affair with her mom and expressed her desire to meet me and apologize. I hesitated at first, uncertain about whether I wanted to meet her. However, my husband encouraged me to have a conversation with her, suggesting that it might provide me with some closure, so I extended an invitation for her to come to my house. When A arrived, I couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance she shared with her mother, except for her nose. She sat down and tearfully shared her own painful experience of being cheated on by her husband. She had even contemplated ending in the aftermath. Recently, she also discovered that she was conceived as a result of my ex-husband's affair with her mother. She earnestly apologized to me and begged for my forgiveness. Initially, I had entertained thoughts of mocking her before our meeting, but now I felt a deep sense of empathy. I saw my younger self in her, from 25 years ago. She explained that she didn't know why she sought me out, but believed that I was the only one who could truly understand her. My heart went out to her, and I couldn't bear to see her in such distress. So I embraced the poor girl who was sobbing uncontrollably, and I cried with her. I assured her that she was an incredible woman and that her husband's actions were not her fault but his own. We sat and talked for a while, during which she confided in me about her anger upon learning how her parents had hurt me. Now, she viewed her mom as a homewrecker and her dad as a cheater, the very things that led to the downfall of her own marriage. Honestly, I know many people might say I should feel a sense of vindication, but I don't. A is clearly grappling with something profoundly difficult. It must be excruciating for her to come to terms with how she was conceived. I don't want her to punish her parents or herself. While what they did was undoubtedly wrong, they also loved her deeply and provided her with a good life. I couldn't find it in my heart to harbor any resentment towards her. I even invited her to stay for dinner, and my kids and husband were kind to her. I packed her some leftovers and homemade cookies. She asked if we could stay in touch, and I agreed. My husband and I will be moving soon as our son is heading to college, and our daughters will be following suit this year. We plan to sell our place and return to our hometown. Until then, we can continue to meet, but I wanted to establish some boundaries. It's truly unbelievable how 25 years ago I was cursing A's family for tearing my life apart, but now I feel nothing but compassion. She's a good-hearted young woman who wants to make amends for her parents' mistakes, and I don't know many people who would take that path. I'm willing to help her, even though I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do or if she has ulterior motives. Only time will tell.